You're about to lift your coffee cup. Your hand moves. Simple. But here's the part no one tells you. Your brain started planning that move almost a full second before you felt any urge to reach for it. And you had no idea. That gap between what your brain does and what you feel changes everything you think you know about choice. Think about your day so far. You picked what to wear. You chose what to eat. You clicked on this video. Each time, it felt like you decided first, then your body followed. That's the story your mind tells. But the last few decades of brain science have been pulling at that story like a loose thread, and the whole thing might be starting to unravel. Here's why this matters right now. We live in a world where every tap, swipe, and scroll gets logged. Ads predict what you'll buy before you know you want it. Courts send people to prison based on the idea that they chose to break the law. Rehab programs assume addicts can choose to stop. If our brains are making calls before we even feel the urge, what happens to blame? What happens to praise? What happens to the whole idea of, you should have known better? But don't jump to the easy answer yet. This isn't a clean case of our free will is fake. There's a twist coming that most people miss, and it changes the stakes in ways you won't expect. Let's start with what actually happens in your brain when you decide to move your finger. In the early 1980s, a scientist named Benjamin Libet asked people to do something dead simple. Sit in a chair, watch a clock, flick your wrist whenever you feel like it, and note the exact moment you felt the urge. At the same time, he measured the electrical buildup in their brains. What he found shook the field. There was a slow wave of activity in the motor region. It started rising about half a second before anyone reported feeling the urge to move. The brain was gearing up for the action before the person had any sense of wanting to do it. Picture that for a moment. You're sitting there. You think you're choosing when to flick your wrist. But the electrical ramp in your skull started its climb while you still felt totally still, totally passive, totally undecided. By the time you felt something, your brain was already well on its way. Later studies pushed this even further. Other teams found that this buildup could start much earlier than Libet measured. And here's where it gets really strange. A team in Berlin put people inside a brain scanner and asked them to press a button with either their left or their right hand. Whenever they felt like it, their choice, left or right. Simple, but the scanner could pick up patterns in the front of the brain that hinted at which hand the person would pick. And it could do this up to 7 seconds before the person reported feeling any urge at all. 7 seconds. That's not a blink. That's not a split-second thing. You could hum a line of a song in 7 seconds. You could tie a shoe. And the whole time, the machine already had a pretty good guess about what you'd do next. Now, before you throw your hands up and say, well, that settles it. Free will is dead. Hold on. The guess wasn't perfect. The machine got it right a bit more often than a coin flip. Better than chance, but nowhere close to mind reading. The brain was leaning in a direction, but the outcome wasn't locked in. There was still room for something to shift. And that room is where things get really interesting. Libet himself noticed something odd. Even though the brain's buildup started before the urge, there was a brief window right before the action where people could still stop. They could feel the urge build and then slam the brakes. He called this the veto. Your brain starts the engine, but you still have a hand on the brake pedal, at least for a thin slice of time. How thin? A fraction of a blink. And if people tried to cancel the action within that window, they could do it most of the time. But once the window closed, the action fired and there was no pulling it back. So here's the strange picture that emerges. You don't get to start the action. Your brain does that without asking. But you might get to stop it. You're not the one who says, go dot. You're the one who says, wait, no .ts. It's less like being a driver and more like being a security guard with one hand on a panic button. You didn't plan the heist, but you can hit the alarm if you catch it in time. But here's the catch. That veto window shrinks under pressure. When people are tired, distracted, or stressed, it gets even smaller. Think about how many of your daily choices happen when you're juggling 3 things at once. When you're half asleep, when your phone just buzzed. The brake pedal is there, but your foot might not reach it in time. Now, some scientists looked at all this and said, wait, maybe we've been reading the brain signals wrong. That slow buildup in the motor region, the one Libet thought was the brain preparing a decision, might not be a decision at all. It might just be noise. Think of it this way. Your brain is always humming with random electrical chatter. Tiny spikes and dips all the time with no purpose, like static on an old radio. Most of the time, that static stays low. But every so often, by pure chance, it crosses a line. And when it does, the body moves. A team tested this idea with a math model. They said, what if the buildup isn't a plan? What if it's just random waves that happen to pile up past a tipping point? They ran the numbers, and the model fit real brain data with striking precision. Nearly every time, it matched what actual human brains produced. That changes the game. If the buildup is noise, then Libet's whole setup measured the wrong thing. The brain wasn't deciding. It was just shifting around, and a random spike happened to trip the wire. No ghost in the machine, no hidden commander, just static crossing a line. But if that makes you feel better about free will, the next finding will unsettle you again. Surgeons have put tiny electrodes on the exposed brains of awake patients during operations. When they sent a small pulse to one specific spot, something wild happened. The patient's arm would twitch. And when asked, the patient said, "Right, I wanted to do that." They felt a real urge, a genuine sense of intent, even though the impulse came from a wire, not from any thought or choice. The brain took an outside signal and dressed it up as a personal decision. Think about what that means. If a surgeon's electrode can create the feeling of wanting, the feeling of meaning to act, then how much can you trust that feeling in daily life? When you reach for your phone, how do you know the sense of NASA, I want to check it, see, came from you and not from some neural quirk that just happened to cross the line? So where does this leave us? No free will at all? Just puppets of our brain chemistry? Not so fast. There's a whole school of thought that says we've been asking the wrong question. The real question isn't whether your choices are caused. Everything is caused. Rain doesn't choose to fall. But you're not rain. The question is whether your choices come from your reasons, your values, your sense of who you are. And that's a very different thing from being caused by a random spark. Picture a raft on a river. You didn't pick the river. You didn't make the current. But you have a rudder. And a rudder, even a small one, can steer you toward one bank or the other. You can't go upstream, but you can choose your landing spot. And that choice, even within the flow of causes, is real. It's yours. When a student thinks about cheating on an exam, a lot is happening in their brain. Old habits fire, stress hormones flow, fear of failure pushes one way. But they also have values. They have a sense of who they want to be. They can weigh those against the impulse. And when they put the cheat sheet away, that act of weighing is what matters, not whether some neuron fired first. This lines up with how we actually live. You don't forgive a thief because neurons fired. You ask whether the person could have weighed their reasons and chosen a different path. But this view has limits, and it's important to be honest about them. The lab studies that map all this use very simple tasks. Press a button, flick a wrist. Those aren't the same as choosing a career, ending a relationship, or forgiving someone who hurt you. When the choices get complex, the early signals get weaker, fuzzier, harder to decode. The neat timeline of brain first, mind second starts to blur. Nobody has yet proven that the same head start applies to the kind of choice that keeps you up at night. The brain may work very differently when the stakes are real and the options are tangled. We just don't know yet. And that gap in what we know is worth sitting with. There's also a trap that's easy to fall into. Some people hear not a random noise triggers actions and think, "Rush, great, so if it's random, I'm free." But random isn't free. If a dice roll picked your actions, you wouldn't call that freedom. You'd call that luck. Real agency needs something more than chaos. It needs the ability to act for reasons, to reflect, and to change course based on what you care about. So the picture is messier than any headline can capture. Your brain moves first. But you can sometimes veto. The buildup might be noise, not a plan. A zap can fake the feeling of intent, and yet, the ability to steer by your values is real, even if it works inside the flow of causes rather than above it. If this made you rethink what choice really means, there's a lot more at this depth on the channel. Drop a comment and tell me which part hit you the hardest. I genuinely want to know. And tonight, when you set down your coffee cup, notice the urge. Feel it rise, and wonder, just for a moment, who reached first? You or the brain that calls itself you?